All right. Welcome to the Domestic Draft Podcast. I'm Evan Bierman here with Eric Bierman filling in for Dan Sloak. Dan is out this week. He's actually on a trip. He's over in Europe in Portugal, and I think he's making a stop in Italy as well. But we are, lucky enough to have Eric Bierman on the show and provide us with his knowledge. We're going to be talking some fantasy football today. Eric, thanks so much for being here.
What's going on, Evan? Happy to be here. Talking my
Yeah,
favorite stuff. So
for sure.
I know this is a beer podcast, but I'm kind of on a diet. You can call it that. So I will not be having one. But what do you got over there?
Yeah. I saw you this past weekend, so it was nice to see, nice to be up in Wisconsin for a little bit there. So I brought back a beer. It's one that you can get anywhere though. It's a Leinenkugel's Summer Shandy. So that's the beer I'm drinking today. It's out of Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin. And actually their story is kind of interesting. In 1845, goes back quite a bit here. Jacob Leinenkugel and his family immigrated to Wisconsin from Meckenheim, Germany, where Jacob's father was an innkeeper and brewer himself. Equipped with German brewing knowledge and tradition passed down from his family, Jacob started his brewery in 1867 in the logging town of Chippewa Falls. Its rich soil was perfect for growing hops and grains, and the pure water that ran through the town was a perfect ingredient for crafting beer. Today, sixth-generation family members are involved in the company, helping to bring the same family-inspired recipes that Jacob poured his heart and soul into to consumers across the country. So still a family business. Very, very cool. Leinenkugel's definitely pick some of these up. I'm sure, a lot of people have tried summer shandies before. You can get them at ballparks. You can get them, at pretty much any grocery store. But summer shandy is 4.2%. It gets a 3.52 on Untapped. Traditional Weiss beer with refreshing natural lemonade flavor. Makes it really, in my opinion, the perfect summer beer. But, with summer kind of, dwindling a little bit here, we got football coming up. And you know what football means, Cakes, Eric? It is fantasy football time. And
the
it
best
is,
season of the year, man.
Yeah, it's, it's one of our favorite seasons of the year here. And with drafts coming up, the season starts, like we said, pretty soon. It's starting on September 8th with the Rams against the Bills. Huge matchup to start the season. So I'm pretty stoked for that one myself. And then we got, shows like HBO's Hard Knocks comes back today. That's going to be with Dan Campbell and the Lions. Eric, are you a Hard Knocks fan?
It depends on the team, honestly. And since it's the Lions and me being a big Bears fan, I probably won't watch. But I know there are a lot of Motor City Dan Campbell fans out there, so I'm sure they'll be excited to tune in tonight.
There's people ready to run through a wall for this guy. He's a pretty inspiring coach. I don't know. It's I think I'm going to tune in just to watch some of his speeches to the players. I heard that Aiden Hutchinson, their rookie, does kind of a funny song in front of the whole team. How they make the rookies get up in front of everybody during the team meetings and do a song and dance or whatever. But it is a division rival, so it's interesting to kind of keep an eye on them and see where they're going. I think that is an ascending team for sure. If they had a different quarterback, maybe Jared Goff's not great, but it's a team to keep an eye on, I think, this year. The NFC North is kind of up for grabs, I think.
Yeah, with next year being a strong QB class reportedly too. I mean, if depending on where they finish this year, they might snag one of those guys next year and off they go.
Yeah. But all right, so today the topic of the day is going to be fantasy football. It's probably going to be our first of a few episodes here where we're talking about fantasy football drafts that are upcoming. I would say with, over the next 3 weeks, people are really ramping up doing fantasy football drafts, and we'll be doing our fantasy football league of podcasts again. So we got to get ourselves in the mood here. But first I want to talk about with you some rules that you like, rules that you don't like for a league. If you were setting up a league today, what kind of rules would you add and which ones wouldn't you have in there?
I mean, I think the first one you have to have is some sort of PPR, whether it be half point, full point, whatever you want to do. Because receptions are a huge part, and you can accrue, plenty of points throughout the day just by grabbing receptions, even if it's for, a yard, or it could be for, -5 yards. Doesn't even matter. Just some sort of points just to keep you interested throughout the day rather than just relying on touchdowns. I think that's a huge element to it.
Yeah, if it's a standard league, which is, the opposite of PPR or half PPR league, touchdowns are huge, and those running backs are the ones that are getting most of the touchdowns. So yeah, I think I'm a big fan of the PPR leagues, the full PPR leagues as well, where it's a full point for each catch. I think that adds, some of the other running backs, just pass catching specialists, it gives them a little bit of value and makes it a little easier to replace running backs, because every year you see big running backs get hurt. So I'm a big fan of the PPR as well. Something that I really like is obviously the championship bracket is a big deal. People going for the championship, but the losers bracket, make that mean something, whether it's, the number one draft pick for the following year, or the last place team, has to wear a dress at the next draft, or, get everyone the beer or something like that. Just make it mean something so that people are playing throughout the year. They're not dumping players to the free agent pool or not checking their teams. I think it's important for everyone to play throughout the full year. What do you think about that?
I mean, I can't tell you how many leagues I've been in where they simply just didn't do anything. And, half the league is dropping out. They're not paying attention to their teams. It doesn't matter for them. Um, you know, in one of my leagues, we do whoever gets first in the consolation bracket, they get to pick. So we do our draft. We pick players from the NFL draft, and depending on where they are selected in the draft is where you'll get your draft position. So the winner of the consolation bracket will get first pick of the pool of players, and they could potentially take, someone who won't go super high if they want one of the last picks, or they could just take, the proverbial first overall pick and just lock up the one pick. Keeps it interesting, keeps it fresh. I mean, just do something. Because
Yeah.
if not, it's just boring for those other 5, 6, whatever managers.
Yeah, 100%. I think it requires a good bit of creativity on the commissioner's part of your league to make that mean something. And that's interesting that how you guys pick the draft order. That's another thing I wanted to bring up. That's something that I love too, is that the draft order, there's a fun way of determining how, the selections are going to take place. So you mentioned in your league that you guys each get to pick a player, and then the NFL draft happens, and wherever that player goes, that's when you get to choose what draft spot you get. I think that's really fun. One of my leagues, we do a NASCAR race, and you have to pick a driver before the race starts. And there's some crashes, and people that had really, really good drivers, they end up at the back of the pack. So that's a fun way to do it. But and I think somebody today posted a Royal Rumble where each person had a wrestler that runs into the ring. And but my favorite way is the way that you and I do it in our league of record, our home league that's been going on for 10 plus years now. We do a Super Smash Brothers N64 tournament style. But it's N64 like character, and there's a tournament, and you watch them compete on the hard mode, just go at. It's the draft day. It's a lot of fun. So that's my favorite way to do it. But yeah, like another thing that's big, really fun is to league. Make sure you get some from your team from the previous year that you keep in later rounds. I think it gives people a little bit more teams. Bring to trade that we made yesterday, or I traded you Belmy for.
You good? Sorry, you're like really choppy, and I didn't want to miss something while we're still going. You know what I mean?
All right, I'm just gonna keep rolling here. Ready?
Yeah, I think we're good.
What was the last thing you heard?
No, you can keep going. I know exactly where we are. You're mentioning
Okay.
our trade right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it brings me to a trade that we made yesterday. I traded you Darnell Mooney, who you can keep in the 12th round, and you traded me Javonte Williams, who I could keep in the 6th round. I think both are great players, ascending players that will be taken in, rounds much later than they would be taken in a normal draft. I just wanted to hear your take on this and kind of what you were thinking making this trade.
All right. So I rostered Javonte in our league last year. Fantastic rookie, great player. The concern was the volume that he was receiving. And there are reports now coming out this year, since they signed Melvin Gordon back, that they're going to be splitting the carries almost the same as they did last year, except it'll probably be a 60-40 split in Javonte's favor now. If he were to be the bell cow, I definitely would not have traded you him. I would have kept him myself. But with that split back there, it makes me a little uneasy. Yes, they could move on from Melvin next year, and Javonte would be what, a fourth overall keeper next year. So there is still some value there, but Mooney, that guy's just incredible. We were seeing videos of him today over at Bears Family Fest, just making one-handed grabs, and his connection with Fields is special. So I honestly think it's a good trade for each side here, depending on what position you wanted. Now, I already have T. Higgins as a 10th round keeper, so I'll be keeping Higgins and Mooney. I think I'm pretty set on wide receivers, so I'm going to try and hammer running backs in our draft. But then again, I'll probably just let the draft come to me and see what happens.
Yeah. And yeah, on that trade, I like Javonte. I think he's a great player. I have concerns as well about the split backfield, but I think there's only a few real bell cows in the NFL now. What is there? Maybe 8. And I think, a great player in a timeshare. Hey, maybe there's some value to be had there. So if I do end up keeping him, I think he's gonna be great. Mooney obviously is a stud. He's been a stud, like you said, at Bears Family Fest, and he's somebody Dan and I have talked about on this show a lot. Dan does not believe in him, but I think Mooney is a good player, and I think he's gonna have a great season. But that bringing us back to our rules that we like. Like we said, keeper league. We also do individual defensive players. That adds another element too, if you want to keep track of, linemen and linebackers and safeties. We each pick one of those rather than a team defense. It makes it a little bit more interesting when you're watching games. I'm a big fan of the IDP. Some things that we don't like. I don't really like standard leagues. I know you talked in the pre-show too that you're not a big fan of standard leagues, and bonuses too. I'm in a couple leagues where there's bonuses for 100-yard rushing or 300 yards passing. I just don't really see the appeal to the bonuses. What about you?
So I've never played in a bonus league, but one thing on standard leagues, I'm in one. It's also the league that I was mentioning, where we pick NFL players in the draft, and that's how it determines our draft order. So I do like some parts of that league, but standard scoring, to me, it just seems like a crapshoot, honestly, because almost all your points are going to come from touchdowns. And, year to year basis, it's almost impossible to predict touchdowns. It's probably the flukiest way to score points in fantasy football. You can't really predict it. It could happen at any time. You could have your guy get flagged at the 1 yard line, and the guy you're facing has their running back, and then you just punch it in, get 6 points on you. As far as bonuses go, though, I never played in a league with one. I know I just joined one of your other leagues this year that has them, so it'll be interesting to see that. So we'll see. I don't know what to say on that yet.
All right. That brings me to draft strategies. As we look towards our upcoming drafts, Eric, is there a spot in, let's say, a 12-team league, spot where you get to pick which spot you get to pick from? Is there one that is the most appealing to you?
Give me one of the top 3 picks to lock up one of those top 3 running backs. This is a 12-team league, you're saying?
Yeah, we'll just use that as a kind of a baseline.
I can tell you spots that I really don't like.
Yeah. Which ones don't you like?
7, 8, 9, 10. Those are probably the worst ones that, the worst ones to have, the ones that I wouldn't want. I could deal with 11 and 12. That's fine with me because I'm pretty close and getting back to backs there.
Okay, so you like
Um,
having picks that are close to each other.
if I could, yeah. But I mean, 4, 5, and 6 in any draft, not worst case scenario. There are
Because you're still
certainly,
getting a great player at the
yeah, there are
beginning.
certainly worse. So even in a 10-team league, 7, 8, and 9, or 7, 7 and 8, especially, I think would be the worst two there.
Gotcha. Yeah, I do like having, like, if you're at the end there, 11 or 12, you're kind of at the wraparound, you get a couple picks, but then you got to sit there and wait for a while for your next ones and watch all those great players go. Still getting 2 of the top 14 players is nice, but yeah, I would think I would agree. 8 and 9, not my favorite, but this year it seems like there's a lot of good running backs within the top 8 or 9. So I think within those first 8, 9 picks, you should be able to lock up a good solid running back. So with that said, then, you mentioned there's a top 3 for you that are well ahead of everyone else. Who are those 3 players?
So Jonathan Taylor, I think Derrick Henry, and Najee Harris.
Okay.
Simply because Derrick Henry and Najee are going to have tons of volume. Taylor was insane last year. CMC, there's injury concerns, especially given the last couple of years. Yeah, those 3 guys, those 3 running backs are probably the ones that I'm trying to target the most in the first round, if I can get them.
Yeah. It's interesting you bring up CMC because I see Christian McCaffrey's been consensus top 2, 3 player on a lot of the fantasy football sites that I've looked at. People are still believing in him. The last 2 years, he's really put up some duds. Likewise for Saquon Barkley, he had an incredible year and then he put up a couple injury riddled years, but he's fallen a lot further than Christian McCaffrey is. Do you see a big difference in these 2 guys? And why is their ADP so differently? Why are they so different?
I think because CMC in the past, that guy was averaging a lot more than Barkley was in his best years, right? I think in PPR leagues, McCaffrey was averaging 22, 23 points a game. Barkley, maybe I'm kind of just going off the top of my head, maybe around 17 or 18 points. So I think McCaffrey, if he's healthy, will give you a higher floor and has more potential for a higher ceiling as well. So I think that's why you're seeing that big discrepancy because CMC is going middle of the first round, around 4, 5, or 6, maybe even sooner, depending on how someone feels about him. Whereas Barkley's going around, middle of the second round or end of second round.
Yeah, that's a big difference. All right, so second round targets. Who are you looking at? Let's say middle of the second round. Who are you targeting there?
Middle of the second round. Let's see. Who do I got here? DeAndre Swift, if I can get him. I think he was like the RB7 when he was healthy. So that's a pretty big one. But other than that, you're looking at like guys like Stephon Diggs, or I'm still high on Devontae Adams. I believe in the talent. The guy's insane. He does get a downgrade at quarterback, but he is going to someone who he's somewhat familiar with since they were college teammates in Derek Carr. And then Aaron Jones as well is someone I'm still targeting, just because, Green Bay lost Devontae, and I'm not a big believer in their current pass catchers right now. So I think you're going to see a lot of targets towards Aaron Jones. I think he's going to get a lot of receiving work.
Yeah, I would ditto some of those guys. Another guy that I think is going to fall a little bit farther than he should is Tyreek Hill, because he doesn't have Mahomes anymore. He's got Tua now, but there's been a lot of reports saying that they have a strong connection already, and Tua's been one of the best deep ball passers, surprisingly, over the last few years, and that lines up pretty well with what Tyreek Hill does. So I think he's going to be a great player still. I think he might fall a little farther. Somebody to keep an eye on if maybe you're at the end of the second round or something. But I think he should flash again. And then CeeDee Lamb's going to get a little bit more work this year with Amari Cooper not in Dallas. So a couple wide receivers to keep an eye out for. Some late round targets. When when it's later in the draft, do you have any names that are jumping out to you yet? Just give me like one or two guys.
One or two guys from each position, or just one or two guys in general?
One or two guys in general. Two
Oh
people that's
man,
like late in the
I
draft. People are taking kickers and defenses, but you're saying no way, you have to take this guy.
have to take this guy. All right, one of my biggest names. I'll give you my two Chiefs. Is that fair?
Yeah.
The rookie wide receiver Sky Moore, I think, is going to be a big factor for them this year. I'm not a huge fan of Juju Smith-Schuster. I rostered him in a couple of leagues last year, and whenever I watched his games, it didn't seem like he got too much separation. And I live up in Wisconsin, so I hear all the time about Packers fans complaining about MVS's stone hands. So I think there's a real shot you could see Sky Moore be even a top 30 wide receiver, depending on how much work he gets. But then I also want to bring up Isaiah Pacheco or Pacheco. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Andy Reid apparently is enthralled by this guy, saying he's like a combination of LaShawn McCoy and Jamal Charles. And you know me, the 1 year I won our league, I had Jamal Charles. So
That stands out to you. Yeah.
yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. You and I were talking about this previously, and there was Darwin Thompson was a name a couple years back that was the same situation. He was getting reps with the ones, and same thing. Andy Reid was talking him up, and I got burned by that guy. I was taking him way too high. I thought he was going to be the next guy. They still have CH. He was a first round pick. Yeah. So, but with that said, CEH has been kind of ineffective. He hasn't been that great, and there is room for somebody else to take work. So maybe Isaiah Pacheco is somebody to keep an eye out for. You mentioned Sky Moore as an interesting rookie. When in drafts, if this is your first time playing fantasy football, when do you think you should be taking rookies?
To keep it simple, it depends. I think you saw some rookie running backs that were taken kind of early. The biggest one probably Brees Hall from Iowa State. He went to the Jets. He doesn't really have too much competition for a workload there. They took Michael Carter last year, who was pretty good as a rookie last year, but he was a fourth rounder. I think with them trading up to get Brees Hall in the second, I think that kind of speaks volumes as to where they're going, what kind of work he'll receive. So I think he'll be a big one. But for the wide receivers, I think you can probably wait until rounds 8, 9, or 10 to start grabbing some of those guys. There are just so many other proven pass catchers in the league that those guys you can kind of wait on.
Yeah, and I think rookie wide receivers, it kind of takes them at least 8 to 10 weeks to kind of get into their role. I think we're seeing on some of these unofficial depth charts that have been coming out. It's the first week of preseason, but a lot of these rookie wide receivers are kind of buried. So I think, maybe by week 10, all these guys are starting to pop a little bit more. So yeah, I think you got to take them a little bit later in drafts. And the rookie running backs, like you said, Brees Hall is a name to watch out for, but they should be going a little bit earlier. I know when Zeke was taken way back when, he was like a consensus first round draft pick right off the bat. So those rookie running backs definitely go a lot higher than the rookie wide receivers do. And rookie quarterbacks, I think rarely, if ever, work out, but they're usually not somebody that I have on my radar. But that brings me to quarterbacks. When do you take a quarterback?
Oh man, I've always been a big proponent of waiting on quarterbacks. I think this year, especially more than ever, you can sit there and wait until probably the 9th or 10th round and still get a guy like Matt Stafford or Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson or someone like that. I think you can wait that far to get a quarterback.
Yeah, getting the right quarterback, though, to me, it's really important. I think you have to get at least a top 10 quarterback. You can't win a fantasy league. You can't make the playoffs in a fantasy league with number 15 or number 16 quarterback. You can't have Trevor Lawrence and win your fantasy league last year. Like, it just isn't going to happen, with Baker Mayfield or something. You need somebody that's in the top 10. So That's what this draft show is about. Thankfully, it's the top 10 fantasy quarterbacks. So Eric and I are going to give each of our top 10 here and a little bit of reasons why. But all right, with that said, let's get into my top 3 quarterbacks. Eric, I'll give you my top 3, then we'll go for your top 3. All right. My first quarterback off the board is going to be Josh Allen. Josh, he finished as the number 1 quarterback in fantasy football last season, depending on the scoring settings that you had. I mean, he put up about 400 points. That's a lot. And I think, being the number 1 quarterback last year, it's a good bet that he repeats. I think Stephon Diggs had kind of a down year by his standards last year. He was hitting guys like Dawson Knox for touchdowns, who I don't think is particularly that great. But he's got some ascending players too. Gabriel Davis is a player to look out for. He's a good wide receiver too. And then Isaiah McKenzie's getting some love too from the Bills beat reporters. So I think he's got, good players to throw to. I think he's got still even more upside than last year, and he was the number 1 quarterback last year. So he's my number 1. Number 2, I've got Lamar Jackson, who is only a few years removed from his MVP season when he was the number 1 fantasy quarterback. He's, he had a good year last year, averaged 22.9 fantasy points per game to Josh Allen's 24.5. So a couple points less than Josh Allen per game, but he's got a lot of room to improve. I think his running ability wasn't on display as much last year as I think, he has the ability to do. So I think he's got a lot of room for improvement. He's put up the numbers. He's done it before. It's been a few years, but he's still got that kind of ability. And with Marquise Brown gone, he really only has Bateman and Mark Andrews to throw the ball to. So I think we're going to see a little bit more running out of him this year. And then my number 3 is Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert averaged 23.27 fantasy points last year. He finished second in fantasy points among quarterbacks, and he's now scored a combined 713 fantasy points in his first 2 seasons in the NFL, which is the most in NFL history among quarterbacks in their first 2 seasons. He passed Cam Newton, who scored 693. So 20 points more than Cam Newton scored in his first 2 seasons. If you remember back when Cam Newton was a rookie a long time ago, that was, he was a big deal right off the bat. I mentioned rookies rarely impress right off the bat, but Herbert is somebody that has done it. And Cam Newton definitely was somebody that did it back in the day. So those are my top 3. Where are you at?
I think we're pretty similar here. We just have Herbert and Jackson flip-flopped. I'll kind of give my reasoning for that. I just think Herbert's in a better offense. He's got more playmakers around him. So, I mean, we're kind of nitpicky here with the top 3. I mean, all 3 of them are going to be really good this year, barring some sort of injury. But for me, I just think Herbert's got a better supporting cast around him.
Yeah. Who do you have as your 4, 5, and 6?
So 4, 5, and 6, I have Patrick Mahomes at 4, Brady at 5, and Kyler Murray at 6. Now, you can make an argument for Brady over Mahomes here, and I'd be totally fine with it, given that, Mahomes lost Tyreek Hill, huge target for him. But then again, I still think Sky Moore is going to be pretty productive for him. Look, he's still uber talented. He's still got Kelsey. I think he's going to be fine. Brady, he just got Julio Jones. I think a lot of people are forgetting about that. So he's going to have, when they're all healthy, he's going to have Evans and Julio and Godwin. I mean, he's got Leonard Fournette, rookie running back, and Rachaad White, who he can throw the ball to. I mean, he's got plenty of options there. It doesn't seem like Father Time's going to catch up with this guy. And honestly, I think he could play until he's 50. 6, I have Kyler Murray. The rushing upside is there. He doesn't have DeAndre Hopkins for 6 weeks, so that's kind of why I bumped him below Brady. But I still think he's going to be really good this year.
Yeah, that's interesting that you point that out with Kyler Murray. I forgot about DeAndre Hopkins being suspended. He's going to be out for 6 games, right, for the PED suspension. So So he's out. But you hit the nail on the head with those next three guys. I have the same guys: Tom Brady, Kyler Murray, and Patrick Mahomes. Brady's my four. He actually led the league in TD passes last year with 43. He was the QB3 last year. So I'm bumping him down to four. You bumped him a little bit farther, but still within, your top five there. I think it's reasonable to assume with the pass catchers that he has, like you said, those three guys, he's going to be up there again towards the top, leading the league in touchdown passes. So I like Brady a lot, and I think he's somebody you can get late. People, are just waiting for him to fall off, so you can get him kind of later in your drafts. And then Kyler Murray, with Hopkins being out, even he's got that rushing upside though. And when you're missing a big pass catcher like DeAndre Hopkins, maybe he runs a little bit more. And Mahomes, yeah, missing Tyreek Hill is a big one for me. That's why I bumped him down a little bit. Still a great player. Maybe he runs a few more in this year, but he's still going to be up there in points because he's a great player. So I'll go into my next, I'll go through 7 through 10 here. I got Russell Wilson at number 7, having a little bit of a resurgence. I got Jalen Hurts at 8, Aaron Rodgers at 9, and Dak Prescott at 10. Wilson had down year last year. He was hurt. He had that hand injury. He only averaged 18.36 fantasy points per game. He had a good cast around him. He had DK Metcalf. He had Tyler Lockett. Those are decent players, but I think he's stepping into an offense that's ready to go. He's got Cortland Sutton. He's got Jerry Jeudy, 2 ascending players, young receivers, Javonte Williams, we talked about a little bit, and then Melvin Gordon. So their running back room stacked. Their wide receivers are stacked. I think the sky's the limit for him. Maybe Denver lets him throw it a little bit more. I like Russell Wilson a lot this year. He's shown ability in the past to have big games. So, he's definitely somebody I'm going to be looking for later in drafts. Jalen Hurts averaged 21.41 fantasy points per game last year. He was a stud last year. I mean, there were some games where he was at like 0 points, and then halftime comes and the next half he's running a few in and he's getting you 20 points. He was just getting guaranteed to get you 20 points last year, which is kind of the benchmark for me for a quarterback on any given week. So Hurts is super consistent, and now he gets AJ Brown, to go along with Devontae Smith and Goddard. He's got a great supporting cast too. Is he the most talented quarterback in this list? Not in my opinion, but he's going to get you there, I think, fantasy points wise. Aaron Rodgers, I have him at 9, 21 fantasy points per game last year. Missing Devontae Adams is huge, but he's also shown the ability to put up big numbers when Adams is out of the lineup. It'll be interesting to see if he can do that on a consistent basis for a whole year. But I think, is he, he's Peyton Manning, he's Tom Brady. Sometimes you do it with a supporting cast that isn't, superstars. So I think he can still do it. And then Dak Prescott, I have at 10, lost Amari Cooper. Still, he's got some rushing ability. He's still got CeeDee Lamb. He's got this Jalen Tolbert, who they're talking up a lot as a rookie too. And Dalton Schultz is a good pass catcher. I think he's going to be all right. So Dak Prescott's a pretty consistent player too. I like him at number 10. Who do you got 7 through 10?
So 7 through 10, I'll just list them really quick. I got Jalen Hurts at 7. I got Joe Burrow at 8. I got Matt Stafford at 9, and then rounding out 10, I got Aaron Rodgers. So Jalen Hurts, you kind of talked about already. Last year he finishes QB 8, and this year he's getting AJ Brown. So that's kind of why I bumped him up to 7. I'm kind of interested that you don't have Joe Burrow in your top 10 at all, just because I think he's got one of the best trios of wide receivers. And then he's got Joe Mixon on top of that. I got him at 8. He was in the Super Bowl last year, lighting it up against the Rams. I think he's going to have another big year. At 9, I got Stafford. He finished 6th in points last year for quarterbacks. And now he gets Allen Robinson. Allen Robinson, I still think is a great player. I know you're probably out on him given the last couple of years in Chicago, but from what I'm hearing, he's still tearing it up in camp for them, and that's always good to hear. And then 10, I have Aaron Rodgers. He kind of snuck in there for me. I was debating between him, Russell Wilson, and Dak Prescott. But I mean, he's the most talented quarterback in the game right now. He doesn't have the weapons anymore with Adams leaving. But I still think he'll be able to score enough to finish in 10th.
Yeah, so I guess I'll speak to the Matt Stafford elbow injury is definitely concerning me a lot. You know, Sean McVay's spoken to the media and expressed a little bit of concern and said this is more of a baseball injury and not something that you typically see in an NFL player. So when somebody says that about an injury, you know, like I think back to like Chris Carson's neck injury or, you know, just some of those freak injuries that you're just like, man, are they done? So the Stafford injury definitely gives me a little pause. Is there going to be times where they rest him? Do they take him out at halftime when they're up? You know, things like that. And Joe Burrow, you know, you mentioned Joe Mixon, and if I look at the top, you know, some of these top quarterbacks that I'm talking about here, none of these guys really have like a superstar running back. If I'm really looking at everybody, Josh Allen, Devin Singletary, no. Lamar Jackson, who's going to be starting in Baltimore? Is it Dobbins? Is it Gus Edwards? We don't know there. Austin Eckler, I look at him as more of a pass catcher than a stud, you know, between the tackles runner. I mean, he's a great running back. So I guess he's a bit of an exception. Fournette, same kind of thing, a little bit, you know, great pass catching running back. James Conner, you know, I don't know. Is he that great? CEH? No, not really. So I don't know. I think some of these other guys are going to throw it a little bit more. And I think there's some games where Cincinnati maybe leans on the run because they do have Joe Mixon and he's a great player. And I think Joe Burrow last year was a little bit more inconsistent from week to week than some of these other quarterbacks, but he is just on the outside of 10 looking in for me. And then some other names I wanted to mention as late round quarterbacks that people might be interested in. You know, we talked about Devontae Adams here when we're talking about Aaron Rodgers. Well, he's going over to Las Vegas. I almost said Oakland. He's going to Vegas where they have Darren Waller. They have Hunter Renfrow, who's a stud. Now they have Devontae Adams. Josh Jacobs can catch it. Derek Carr's got a lot of people around him that he can throw the ball to. I think he is somebody that could have a huge year, a la Matt Stafford last year when we said, hey, look at his supporting cast he's got here now. So Derek Carr is definitely somebody that I'm going to keep an eye on. I don't know, maybe the end of drafts if you want a backup quarterback or something, somebody with a lot of upside. And a couple other names, upside players, Trey Lance, Justin Fields, a couple guys with some legs that can, you know, dual threat quarterbacks. They can run, they can throw. Are they going to be the next Lamar Jackson? Could they be the next Jalen Hurts? These guys, you know, I think of them, you know, Kyler Murray, they have a little bit of ability two ways there that can get you some fantasy points. So those are guys late in drafts, albeit rookies or, you know, young guys that, not rookies, they played a little bit last year, but, you know, young guys that I think can score you some fantasy points. So those are some other names to keep an eye on. Now we mentioned Justin Fields. I want to get to the Bears training camp updates. Dan and I have been doing some updates every week here. Eric, what's going on at Bears training camp in your opinion?
So the biggest thing right now is the Roquan Smith demanding a trade that just came out this morning. Kind of upset waking up to that. But honestly, I think our group chat especially kind of blew it out of proportion. He doesn't have an agent right now, so it's making it more difficult to get a deal done with him. But look, he's still showing up to practices. He's still on the sidelines. He's engaged with everyone else. I think this is more of a desperation kind of play than anything. And I ultimately do think they're going to get a deal done within the next, week or two.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up, that he doesn't have an agent, because when players demand a trade via their agent, like let's think about Kareem Hunt last week. He demanded a trade and it came out in the media for like a day, and then he's back at practice like the next day. You know, the Browns were probably just like, we're not going to trade you. It is what it is. Either you stay here or you go, or you don't play. And you try and get a contract after not playing for a year. And he was like, all right, well, I'm just going to play this year then, I guess. Roquan Smith's situation is different when he doesn't have an agent and he's going to the media and saying, all right, trade me. I think it's not so much a negotiation tactic as it is when it is with an agent, because now you have a player that's disgruntled going to the media rather than his agent going to the media and saying, hey, this, don't worry about this. this, you might get some blowback, but it's just a negotiating tactic. You know what I mean? Like he has a little bit, when you have an agent, you have a little bit of a barrier between yourself and the negotiations. When Roquan's in these meetings by himself, I think there's a lot of pressure on those meetings. And when the Bears try to negotiate with him the same way they're negotiating with somebody that has an agent, like a Drew Rosenhaus or somebody in the room with them, it's going to be a lot different. You got to play more to the emotional side. Like, do you want to be here? What are you looking for? I think it's not the same kind of negotiation. But that's just, my opinion on that. And I think it is a little bit more concerning that he's going to the media like this. Did he rush to do this? I don't know. The Bears said they thought, this is, we're a couple weeks away, maybe. We didn't think that he was going to go to the media like this, and then he does. So they didn't see this coming. I don't know. To me, it's concerning that it kind of threw them off as well.
I guess the biggest takeaway for me is that he's expressed that he wants to be here, even in his little, notes that he posted on social media today. His desire to be here. Ryan Poles came out today, said how much they want him here. I mean, he's 25. What kind of message are you going to send to the locker room if you're trading away one of your best players, one of your biggest leaders? How do you think that's going to go over in the locker room? I don't think. I don't see them trading him. I really don't.
They can't do it. They can't trade him. There is no way that they can trade him. Chicago will be up in arms if they trade Roquan Smith. He's in his prime. He's a Pro Bowler at a premium position. You can't get rid of him. So he has to be here one way or the other. And I think you got to get something done. Ian Rappaport talked about some of the details of the contract that the Bears were offering him, and it just sounds terrible from the Bears' perspective. You're putting de-escalators in his contract that are going to deteriorate the linebacker market, and just make it. There's just some things that they're putting in this contract that people that are making 15 million plus that aren't quarterbacks just don't have in their contracts. So it just seems like they're trying to sneak some things in here. It seems kind of shady. We don't have all the details, but it just sounds like this is not where they should be at this point, with only a few weeks away for the season starts. Somebody that, is kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum here that I think Chicago is ready for us to move on from is Tevin Jenkins. He's, back at practice now, reportedly doing some individual drills. I can't really make out what this is. Can you? Do you know, is he part of the team now? Did he buy back in? Are they just telling him to go to practice so that they can get something for him in a trade and then he can get traded? What is going on here with Tevin Jenkins?
I other people want to move on from him. I really don't. We saw him in 3 or 4 games last year. And when he was out there, he was bullying people. All right. Yes, there were some penalties. Yes, he stood up for Justin Fields. That's kind of what you want out of a lineman. You want a bully. You want someone who's going to stand up for your quarterback. The guy is still super talented. Yes, there are injury concerns. Look, I want the guy on the team. I want him to succeed. I think he'd be perfect over at right tackle. Maybe kick either Schofield or Reif or Borum into right guard. And it looks like Braxton Jones is killing it over at left tackle. I think this line could be a lot better than people realize if they were just to keep him and get him going.
I don't know. I don't see it. I don't think he fits into that top 5 there. For our line, and the Bears have said we don't know who our line is yet. So I guess, with that said, maybe there's still some room for it, but I don't know. You missed 9 practices in a row and then you show up and you're only doing individual drills. I don't know that we really have space for you. And if we can get something for him, he's a 2nd round player. If we can get something of value, absolutely do it. I think Poles did a good job of getting guys like Braxton Jones that can play the line, and we'll see what they got this year. But yeah, that's the Tevin Jenkins news, the Roquan Smith updates. We talked about how well Darnell Mooney is looking. There has been some other receiver injuries. N'Keal Harry, high ankle sprain. He's going to be out for quite a bit of time here. And, that wide receiver core is struggling right now. It might be the worst in the NFL outside of Darnell Mooney. We'll see if anybody else really can, have any meaningful contributions to, Justin Fields' passing yardage. But we'll see. We'll see how that turns out. I do have a fast fact before we end the show, Eric. We've been talking about fantasy football quarterbacks, so I got a question for you here. There were 3 quarterbacks who've scored more fantasy points in a season than Josh Allen did last year in 2021. Can you name those 3 fantasy quarterbacks? You don't need to name the years. I'll give you those. But here, I'll give you the years, and we'll see if you can get them. 2018.
Patrick Mahomes.
Mahomes. Yep. 2019.
Oh boy. We'll try throwing we'll throw Lamar Jackson. I think that was
Lamar Jackson, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mahomes and Lamar Jackson. And then the other name back in 2013.
2013. Oh boy. I'm trying to remember what I was doing in 2013. 2013, still in college. That was the year Rodgers broke his collarbone, wasn't it? Or was that 2014?
That's too far back for me. I don't know, but I'll give you the answer here. It's Peyton Manning. So Mahomes, Lamar Jackson.
That was gonna be my guess too.
Manning.
See, now you're stealing my thought.
Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, and Peyton Manning are the only 3 quarterbacks. Of course, they all did it in 16 games rather than the 17 that Josh Allen did it in last year. But he put up a top 4 fantasy quarterback season of all time last year. So, both of us have him as number 1. So somebody to look for in your drafts. All right. Thanks again for joining us today. For Eric Bierman, I'm Evan Bierman. You've been listening to the Domestic Draft Podcast. If you're listening on Spotify, don't forget to rate the show. You can find us on Twitter at Domestic Draft, on Instagram at Domestic Draft Podcast. Our website is domesticdraft.com, and you can watch the show on YouTube. Just search up Domestic Draft and drop us a sub. Thanks again for listening. Cheers.